Hey everyone, Kevin here. In this video, we're going to talk about what Donald Trump just said along with Treasury Secretary Besson in Congress, as well as economic data that is starting to show us problems where we hadn't seen them before. Take a look at Exhibit A. This is a Barclays research piece on high-frequency data, indicating that here on the left, when we look at the light blue line, we see the 2023 to 24 pace, and the dark blue line represents the 2025 pace. So we're comparing a 2-year average versus what's happening now. We can see usually in April, lower end spenders tend to spend more on airfares. That is not happening right now. The higher end cohort in April usually continues spending on motor vehicles. That is not happening. In fact, that has plummeted off the right side over here into a negative territory. The higher end in terms of travel has also transitioned to negative at a time where we're usually elevated. We've noticed that the higher end spend on rental cars has probably seen the largest plummet over here, suggesting that potentially business travel is starting to get hit at a negative 10% rate year over year. Not ideal. And then over here, recreational venues with higher end cohorts also turning negative, although it usually turns negative towards the end of April. It's turned negative earlier and more sharply. And in addition to this, Barclays is telling us that what they're seeing in their credit card spending data is suggesting a significant drop, especially in the part of the economy that typically holds up. So they're looking at not just credit card data, but oftentimes they also look at satellite imagery data just to get sort of high frequency data on where consumers are spending their money. And what we're finding over the past weeks is that the higher end is now pulling back more so than discount shoppers. Now, and that the front running of tariffs appears to have abruptly ended, especially when it relates to autos. So heads up for those auto investors. At this point, we're not only below seasonal patterns, but we're starting to see a rollover where we don't usually see it. And this isn't great for the US economy, especially since 49% of spending in America is conducted by the top 1% of individuals, which is insane because if the higher end starts slowing down spending, and we're talking about the upper 30%, not just the top 1%, but the upper 30% of individuals start slowing down their spending, our economy could be in for a serious adjustment. Now, a lot of people believe, including Treasury Secretary Besson, that the stock market and the economy is going to be able to look through this rough patch. After all, we've sent multiple trade deals out. Let's ignore the fact that we have fully loaded ships coming and departing from China, plummeting at the right side of this curve over here, which is very unusual for this time of year, the time where we're usually seeing an increase of shipments, not a decrease when we look at prior years. That has now turned into a plummet of shipments, which is not great. But what we're seeing is Treasury Secretary Besson suggest, hey, we're providing 17 out of 18 of our major trading partners with excellent deals that'll lower tariffs on U.S. goods substantially. This is what he's saying in Congress. But when you actually break down what he just said, you should be a little bit more careful. What Treasury Besson just said is that tariffs on U.S. goods are being proposed to come down substantially. So, in other words, the proposals that appear to be provided by Besson to other countries are, hey, let's start with making sure we get your reciprocal tariffs to our reciprocal tariffs lower. It doesn't sound to me like other countries are actually providing us proposals either. See, the other part of his sentence is we have provided 17 of our trading partners negotiated deals or deal proposals rather on how to lower tariffs on U.S. goods. So when you look at these two things, to me, it seems a whole lot like there's somebody called Treasury Secretary Besson and maybe somebody whose name rhymes with Shrump who's providing suggestions or concepts or ideas of negotiations, but we're not actually seeing any deals because the other side, our counterparties, the other countries that we're supposed to be allied with are saying, whoa, what's in this for us? So far, this is your proposal on getting stuff on your stuff lower. But what about all of the other tariffs? Case in point, let's look at Japan for a moment. Here's a really good graphic on Japan. So this graphic shows you that Japan right now is subject to a 25% steel and aluminum tariff. plus an additional 25% automobile and auto parts tariff, plus an additional 10% flat rate tariff, and an additional 14% tariff. You can see how complicated these trade deals are when there's so damn much going on, and this seems to continue to evolve. That said, Japan suggests we want to have bilateral talks on tariff measures, including all of these topics. However, the United States says the only thing that we're willing to discuss is the 14% item over here. In my opinion, it's kind of like a seller that you've made an offer on their home, and let's say it's a $500,000 home, and you made a $490,000 offer, and the seller comes back and says, yeah, I know my home is listed for $550,000, but now what I want is $550,000 for my home. I want you to close in 7 days, and I want you to remove all of your inspection contingencies tomorrow. Japan says, whoa, can we negotiate on this? And the seller goes, yeah, maybe I'll give you 2 days to make an inspection. And you're like, wait, you're still asking for 50 grand more than where we were before, and you're still asking to close a lot faster than where we were in the original offer. And that is just a small fraction of the problems that we have to discuss here. Maybe a deal won't actually be happening. And that's obviously the big concern of the stock market now, is we were told last week that we should expect a deal soon. And of course, insiders in the banking industry, like JP Morgan individuals, heard about it first. And then, of course, we had a 10-day stock market rally. But now the stock market is like, okay, the stock market was rallying on this premise that we're going to see a deal with India, and then we're going to see a deal with Japan, and then, talks had begun with China. But now what we're actually hearing is India isn't making a deal with us. India's like, hey, maybe we could go 0-0 on auto parts and pharmaceuticals, but beyond that, no deal. Instead, India goes and signs a landmark trade deal with the United Kingdom that is being hailed the largest trade deal since Brexit. Okay. What about China? China, we're talking with China, right? No! Besson, even just this morning in Congress, in testimony before Congress, says, no, we haven't begun negotiations with China yet. Well, no duh, because China is loving this. Don't get me wrong. China's getting whacked as well. Like, they are getting hurt. But China has this willingness to suffer pain to do what they see as longer term more beneficial. So yeah, some manufacturers might go bankrupt, services spending might be falling in China, and China is going to start hiding some of the ugly data from us like they always do. This is wrong, but they will do that. But in the meantime, what is China doing? Oh, well, they're working with the European Union on expanding openness, fewer tariffs on Chinese-made vehicles going into Europe. Toyota, in the Wall Street Journal just this morning, had this beautiful piece on how Toyota sells a delicious $15,000 beautiful SUV. But you can only get it in China. Well, because the Chinese have a very competitive auto market. And frankly, this is why I say if there were zero tariffs, we'd all be driving Chinese cars in America because they're just so freaking cheap. It wouldn't make sense for the features you get to buy any other vehicle. And that's why a lot of countries are protectionist. Europeans are like, I don't know, man. We don't want all these Chinese cars coming in here because it's going to put the Volkswagen out of business. Well, now Europe is like, well, the U.S. is screwing us over here, so let's just make deals with the Chinese. And that's what's happening. I mean, Xi Jinping just today reiterated, quote, that multilateralism and fairness must be upheld in the international community before there should be any kind of talks. I can't believe it's the communist country that's saying that. What? This is insane. But one of the reasons we have this insanity is because Donald Trump just doesn't understand what he's talking about. And I'm not sure if this is just part of his negotiating strategy, act like he's stupid, or if he's legitimately stupid. I don't know. I don't want to believe that our president is legitimately stupid, but Trump today literally reiterated that we don't want cars from Canada. There's no reason for us to subsidize Canada. Well, okay, two things we got to break down here. Let's start with the subsidized Canada one. Trump still believes that a trade surplus or deficit is like a profit and loss, whereas if you're in a deficit, you're losing money and you're subsidizing the other country. That's wrong. Okay, I have a trade deficit with my nannies for my 7 children. I spend way more on them than they spend on my stuff. But guess what? That frees Lauren and I to run Househack, to make more money, to make YouTube videos, to run our other businesses that make us more money. So does that mean they're ripping us off? No, we actually think we have a great relationship with the people who help us. And we think it's a mutually beneficial relationship. They get secure hours, they get great pay, they get benefits, and what do we get? We get time and the opportunity to spend a lot of time with family when we can and when we're available and when we do. But we're not spending time prepping food in the kitchen for little babies because in the meantime, we're able to go do a job, such as what we do with Househack. Open to non-accredited investors, by the way. We have this little pitch sheet here I think is really cool. Diversify away from most tariff risk, diversify away from rich stock market valuations, diversify away from frothy VC AI valuations, diversify into good American real estate. And mind you, not American real estate where prices are falling right now. We actually saw a fall in prices in Texas and Florida coming 3 years ago. So we invested into markets that are holding up. It's just kind of, real estate moves very slowly, so it's kind of easy for us to sort of see that coming. But anyway, take a look at that. Open to non-accredited investors over at househack.com. You get 5%, all the upside on your investment should our stock valuation go up, which obviously, knock on wood, want it to explode in the long-term future. Can't make any guarantees, but you get 5% until conversion. You get all the upside and downside protection, so go check that out at househack.com. Read about all the documents that are available. So Trump doesn't seem to understand that a trade deficit is not a subsidy of the other country. It just means we are utilizing more of their product for our own purposes. Okay, then you have this idea that we don't really want cars from Canada. Well, look at Ford, for example. Ford, 80% of Ford vehicles are made in the United States. They're probably the most American-made vehicle next to Tesla's. Yet they're still seeing a $1.5 billion tariff impact because even though 80% of Fords are made in America, in the United States, we still get parts, components, batteries, whatever from other foreign countries. And these components would be really difficult to get access to here in America at affordable prices without significant industry subsidies. And we're not getting massive subsidies from the Trump administration for these industries to actually rebuild those sort of things. Now, eventually, you kind of have to look at it. It's like, do we want to go full free market? Then don't have subsidies, but don't have tariffs. Or do you go tariffs and protectionist, but then you subsidize your own manufacturing? And all we're getting right now is the tariff side of the equation. So it's a big mess. And the longer term damage of this will obviously evolve over the next few months here. The problem is the hope that we're going to get a quick trade deal done seems to be fading. A lot of folks say it could take as long as 3 years to get actual trade deals done. I don't think it's going to take that long. But I do think that trade deals are going to take substantially longer than markets are currently pricing in. I think it's one of the reasons why you're seeing gold rise again and yields hold stable, because we know the Fed's just going to sit on their hands. People are like, oh, the Fed tomorrow, maybe they'll cut rates, and Trump's going to beg for them to cut rates. They're not going to cut rates. It ain't going to happen. Like, it's not priced in. They wouldn't do it even if the market was pricing it in to some degree. It would be stupid. I think there's essentially a 0% chance. I'd be shocked if we got a rate cut tomorrow. Obviously, I'll be covering it. But anyway, that's my take. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye and good luck out there.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.